am with the MetroBoard of the Chicago Urban League, and during this past year, we've been working very hard to make sure that we are talking about the issues that matter to you guys the most. The issues that are not only on the forefront of public policy, but also on the forefront of people's minds. One of those happens to be feminism. It has started a national debate over time, probably in our time not more pertinent than what we've recently seen in the presidential debate. As shocking as a lot of people might have considered that, for a majority of the American population, language like that isn't necessarily new. What is new is hearing it from a presidential candidate. What also isn't new is some of the follow-ups to it. We heard from his sons who said that if you're a woman and you don't want to be sexually harassed, you should be a preschool teacher. An interesting argument, but in his mind, in any situation where you're working with grown men, as a woman, you should accept being sexually harassed because it's going to happen. In America today, we have a lot of young women in particular who don't want to be associated with the feminist movement for a variety of reasons. Largely because of a lack of understanding of what that means, but also because, to be honest, of the women in this room, the majority of them are of color. The feminist movement hasn't necessarily always spoken to the issues of women of color, nor put those women's issues on the front lines, or the women who actually are of color on the front lines. When you think of the feminist movement, when you think of opportunity for women, the people who are usually showcased in the ad campaigns and the commercials, who are speaking about he for she, they're all women who don't look like me. They're all women who don't look like Anna Valencia. So one of the things that we also want to get across to you with this panel, with this discussion, is that feminism matters, and feminism matters to women of color as well. And a lot of the issues that face women every day are actually exacerbated if you are a woman of color. So I'm thankful for those who agreed to be a part of this panel. I'm thankful for the people in the room. I also look forward to you having a really open and engaging conversation around what feminism means, what it means in your daily lives, what it means in the workforce, what it means for gender roles. What types of issues come up in your life as a woman? And also, because we do have some men in the room, how we engage men around this topic. Because to be honest, it would be very hard to get to a lot of the policy measures that we need to move forward as women if we don't also engage men. It will be very hard to break and dismantle what we often see, an intersectionality of toxic masculinity and what many consider being a man, objectifying women. For us to be able to actively teach and train on those things, we also have to engage those men. So kudos to the men who are brave enough to walk into the room. If part of the conversation is uncomfortable, I apologize that I'm actually not sorry. Partially because there are situations in life where we as women will always be uncomfortable. And in many of those cases, it is caused by males. So today we're here to put it all on Front Street, to tear down that curtain that often hides a lot of what women go through, but also to showcase some of the great things that women of color are doing and some of the things that we are working towards progress on. Why is this panel important? It's important because women's rights are important. It's important because women make up the predominant population in this country. It's important because without women, there would not be a population in this country. It's important because women every day are taking much stronger strides in moving towards executive leadership, in graduating from college and grad school, in leading households, in developing policy, in running for office. It's important because women are on the forefront of change and innovation in STEM. It's important because there hasn't been another time in history where we've had more women on the front lines of social movements, on the front lines of change, on the front lines of not only education, pharmaceuticals, STEM, all of these things that typically were areas where you didn't see a lot of us. But those gains didn't come without immense challenges. And we're here to unpack those. Misconceptions of feminism. We'll get into that a little bit later. But along with those misconceptions are often caricatures of what it means to be a feminist. Has anyone ever heard that if you wear makeup, you can't be a feminist? Right. If you wear heels, you can't be a feminist. Right. if you aren't walking around in pants, you can't be a feminist. Who knew there were so many rules to being a feminist in America? Or that you're all loud, braggadocious. You don't want men around. Being a feminist to a lot of people means that you are anti-man. Nobody wants to be a part of a movement that's anti-man, especially a single woman. That just doesn't look cool. All misconceptions of feminism.
Oh, okay. Hello, can everybody hear me? I like talking with the microphone. What does feminism mean to me? So when Amisha was gracious enough to ask me to be on this panel, I had to think about it for a little while. What does feminism mean to me? Because it has meant different things to me over the course of my lifetime. And so one of the authors that I loved to read when I was in college, that was Bell Hooks. Are people familiar with Bell Hooks? She's a feminist, a black feminist writer, and she writes from a black woman's perspective. And reading many of her books through college, I was able to kind of find out who I was, and and really discover who I was as a woman in college. And so I picked up one of her books, and one of the things that how she defines feminism, she defines it as ending sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression of all women. And I kind of agree with that definition of it. It's not, feminism has taken on the mantra that it's the hatred of men, and that all the stereotypes that Amisha had listed out, that somehow we don't like men, we want to be like a man, we want to perhaps maybe dress like a man. For me, it doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that women just want to be equal to men and still also be happy as women, and also spend time with whoever our sexual partner is. And so, and in particular for black women, I believe that, as stated before, that feminism and women of color feminism has taken on it takes on a different role, because black women are not seen as feminists. Gloria Steinem is the face of feminism. And when they ask about women's issues, you're never ever going to hear them talk about or ask a black woman to be the front and center of that issue. You're not going to really, I don't think I've ever even seen a Hispanic woman being asked a question to speak about women's issues. It's usually a white woman, and it's usually a white woman with blonde hair to speak about those issues. And so for me, as a black woman, it's very, very important to me, because I'm a very proud black woman. I'm a very proud black person, and I'm also very proud to be a woman at the same time. So it's very, very important, I believe, for me to talk about those two things at the same time, not to separate race and not to separate my gender. I have to talk about those things at the same time. So I hope that answers your question, because I can go on. I'm going to stop now.
I so hate going second because you took the exact quote that I was going to use. But it tells but it does tell you how influential Bell Hooks is, because reading her Ain't I a Woman and Feminism is for Everybody really had a great impact on my life. And I also subscribe to that definition that feminism is a movement against sexism and sexist oppression and exploitation, and really for everyone, because it's important for the men in the room to know that patriarchy harms you too. So the same kind of construction that says that we have to be submissive also says that you have to be hypermasculine and you have to be hard, and that's damaging to you as well. The way it's affected me when I write in particular about the intersection of race and gender. I want to help my sisters get free, because black women in particular, the way people view us, potential employers, the government, potential partners, is very distorted. And it's distorted through this lens of race and gender and hundreds of years worth of stereotypes. You talk about having to work twice as hard. We very often have to work 3 times as hard to get over that barrier of race and gender. And so that's what it means to me, and that's how it affects what I do in my everyday life.
I agree, all of this. And I think I'll just add a personal touch for me, coming up and where I am and my life experiences. To me, I think I have another also twist I want to add to feminism. To me, I also think it's, definitely creating an equal playing field, education, workforce. I see that so much more as I've come up in political and government. And when you get to the top, there's a lot of white men around you. And so for me, I've had to learn very quickly how to adapt to that. And so I definitely think, though, there is about breaking down barriers. And I also think it's about supporting other women. I really think that's super important that we support other women for whatever choice they make, whatever choice they decide to do, whether it's, marching and protesting or if it's they decide to stay at home. And I think sometimes women can be the most harshest critics on each other. We can be the most judgmental on each other because everyone has a different viewpoint of what feminism means to them, and it's about respecting that viewpoint. And so I want to spend a lot of my life kind of doing that, of supporting each other, women, to get them to the top, and how do we not tear each other down. I also, when I think of feminism, I think about making our own choices as it regards to just not, I think, I was actually having this conversation about Gloria Steinem. I was at a luncheon where she was there, and other people felt very moved, and I felt like I wasn't inspired. I mean, she was sounding like three things, but I just didn't feel that connection. And I think, too, some people think feminism is just one thing, and that happens to be a lot, white women, like choice, right? And that's just one issue. There's so many other issues that affect women, especially women of color, that I just don't think is a forefront of feminism. And there are some groups that haven't reached out enough to, ask for diverse opinions about what it means. So I think what we're doing today is very needed, and we need to keep talking about it, and we need to keep getting diverse views and opinions of what feminism means. So that's just my personal touch.
All right. First, I'd like to thank Amisha for inviting me on this panel. I am going to be the odd woman out and not label myself as a feminist. I am a womanist. The term was coined. Sorry.
She did not make this clear when she got invited.
The term was coined by Alice Walker, who authored The Color Purple and In the Search of Our Mother's Garden. So, womanist is trying to have gender equality as well as to fight against racial oppression for both African American men and women. Oftentimes, historically, we've seen the feminist movement only cater to white middle class women. When we talk about income inequality, the main statistic is white women, well, women in general just make 77 cents compared to the dollar the male makes. It doesn't go deeper than that. Black women make only 64 cents compared to a male's dollar. Latino women only make 53 cents compared to a male's dollar. And what about African American men? What dollar do they make when they are incarcerated at high rates, when they are being discriminated just based off their name if it's too urban? So right now, we're at another level. We just can't focus on just women. We have to go deeper and focus on African American issues, Latino issues, and be more inclusive when we talk about feminists. We just can't just be divisive this way.
So ditto. No, I'm really glad we're having this panel discussion now and not in the 1920s, because we're actually living in the third wave of feminism, right? The first wave of feminism was super white, and but also in the sense that it was imperialistic and sort of beltway. It really only focused on many of the issues that the rest of the panelists have discussed, right? The second wave of feminism is sort of where Alice Walker comes in with womanism. Feminism is to womanism as lavender is to purple, right? Purple, deeper, darker, richer, more inclusive, you know what I'm saying? So for a long time, I really did consider myself a womanist, right? But now that we're in this third wave of feminism, I'm super invigorated and inspired by this wave of feminism because it is so inclusive. It intersects with race, it intersects with gender identity, so trans women are included in this narrative and in this discussion, and it intersects with class, which is, and not just American class, but the global citizenry of women who live in, you say abject poverty here, I mean abject poverty there, right? And so they are now included in this wave of feminism. So it's now easier for me to identify as a feminist now that I see these young activists and these organizations, taking a full embrace and scope of what the issues of oppression, what sorts of issues of oppression need to be addressed vis-a-vis the umbrella of feminism.
One of the main issues that often gets left out of the feminist debate entirely is the origins of policy around how women were to relate to their world, how women were to act in public, as well as how women were to respond in relationships. And yes, this was actually a thing during the 17th, 18th, and even the 19th century. At the dawn of time, in terms of us actually keeping a historical record, women weren't, in this country, women were not allowed to go out in public without their fathers or their husband or brother. Here. So when we throw all types of salt and shade on a lot of Middle Eastern countries about that being something that is still prevalent there, we often forget that that was something we did here for close to 300 years. That women were also treated as property. Well, black women were slaves, but for those who weren't black, even if you were married, you could not own anything. Any ownership of it, or anything that you had before you got married automatically was given to your husband. In addition to that, there was a vocal tone you had to use in all conversations. You could not raise your voice publicly as a woman, even within your own household to a man. There was a dress code. Everything had to be covered. You didn't have to wear the scarf, but everything else had to be covered. Again, when we look at other countries across the globe, and we point to these huge humanitarian issues against women, we aren't very reflective as to how we treated women right here in the United States. We aren't very reflective to the fact that there's been some movement in the wage gap in America. Not as much as needs to be there. But we aren't attentive to the fact that over the past 35 years, minority women, black women, Latino women, have moved only 18 cents towards a white man's dollar. What we don't pay attention to is that women today are still locked out of a lot of positions. Not because they don't have the talent or the capacity. We know women are graduating more in higher number. We know women have more degrees in higher number. We know women are taking on more internships, they're being more involved in their community. There are so many things that would allow for you to advance a lot faster. But the person on the other side of that table making those decisions is often not a woman. What we also know is that it's very difficult in many instances for a woman in her work to be taken seriously. And that speaks even higher volumes if that is a woman of color. One of my cousins just made headlines this week. To me, Cross, shout out. Not for necessarily good thing. Because she tried to save somebody's life on a Delta flight. He had gone unconscious multiple times. And when she went to tell the flight attendant that she was a doctor and assist, she said, no, we need to find a real doctor. She tried 3 times to help this man. But some random white guy stands up and they rush him right to him. Don't know what type of doctor he is, didn't ask for his credentials, but they definitely asked for my cousin's credentials. Then asked her why she was flying to Detroit, then asked her where she came from, then asked her how long she had been practicing, and it was a whole ordeal. And after it was all over, they offered her some flyer miles. Well, she's coming for Delta, so she's gonna get a lot more than flyer miles. Point is, it is very hard for you, even if you are a professional minority woman, to be taken seriously in the world that we live in. For our panel, because all of you are successful women in various aspects of your fields, what are some of the, or what would you say was an instance in which you faced extreme discrimination or an example of discrimination based on your gender? Go ahead.
One example, Amisha. Amisha, it happens every day. Every day. The
Gender and intersex.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let me just tell you, well.
We can't separate being black and white.
Right. Let me say this, that, okay, so let me just tell you all what I do for a living. I'm an assistant state's attorney, okay? So I work at 26th in California. And even though this is Chicago, Illinois in the year 2016, apparently people have never seen a black prosecutor before, okay? So when I walk through and deputy sheriffs that I see every day, one sheriff in particular will ask to see my credentials, or, or are you the probation officer? That's the one that I get every day. Or you must be the probation officer when I walk into a courtroom. So yeah, instances of sexism and racism, yeah, that for me, because I work in the criminal justice system, is something that happens every day. So I just can't give you just one instance of it. I can give you several instances. So I'll say that.
Yeah, just one. I think you're going to sense a pattern here, and that is people not acknowledging or recognizing black women and our skills and our ability, and not recognizing us as professionals. I worked for a long time, I still do work in communications and marketing. And for a long time, I worked for PR agencies here in Chicago. And I can count on both hands the number of times I walked into a corporation with my team that I led and had the person I was meeting go to the white guy, no matter how young, didn't matter if he was an intern, to shake his hand and assume that he was the leader of the team and not me. And it's hard to say, was that because of gender? Was that because of my race? Because you can't unhook those things. But you know that those people were thinking that this black woman couldn't possibly be a vice president, couldn't possibly be leading this team. And it happens all the time.
Yeah, I think, in my profession I deal with a lot of men. And for example, the position I have right now in the mayor's office, the only 3 women have ever had it in any mayor's office. 3 women. I'm the first Latina. So that tells you right now kind of what this post is and how you deal with a lot of interactions with men. So there have been multiple times that actually I have felt uncomfortable, and I'm very conscious of what I wear. And is my dress long enough? Is my top not tight? Am I covered enough? I mean, those are the things you think of, because when you deal with some of these men, and I tell you what, since Donald Trump's been around, it's gotten worse. And so you are trying to get them to focus on what you're saying and the policy and your brains, and sometimes you feel, and it's terrible, I have to shrug it off and pretend, like I gotta walk and do this meeting, or I gotta do this presentation. And there's a part of me that wants to call it out right then and there, but then I also have to realize I want to keep my job and I got to be professional. And some part of me is shame on me. Maybe I should say something, and I should, but it's hard because I've got to play this like if I'm too aggressive, then I'm a bitch. If I'm too nice and warm, then they're gonna walk all over me. So it's this constant thing that I am playing out. And one story, and I won't name names, but I'll let you figure it out. I was running a U.S. Senate race, and I had put this plan together. I'd worked months on it. I had gotten all these elected officials very high up to come together to talk about this plan. We get in the room. All 4 leaders are there. They're all white men. All their staffs are there. Each person brings 1 person. They're campaign managers, all white men, but me. And everyone looks at each other like, who's going to run the meeting? And I loved my boss, and he looked at me and said, Anna, go. And I ran the whole meeting, and I did a really good job, by the way. And thank you. But I respect that elected official to have put me there and had empowered me and had my back. And even if he was a man, he was doing something great of putting a Latina in power. And that's what we need more of. And that's why it is important to have this conversation with men and have supporters like that, because we need people to have put us in those positions. Because I'm telling you, it's still a man's world, and we have made a lot of progress. I'm happy I'm here and I'm where I'm at, but we have a lot of ways to go. And so, yes, you deal with it a lot as a woman, and having these open conversations help changes that.
So I got my start in the state government, working as a Dunn Fellow for Governor Clinton's administration. And as a young fellow, I was had to be cognizant of my dress, my wardrobe. Some people told me that, oh, since you worked out, maybe you shouldn't wear fitted dresses, maybe you should wear baggier clothes in order to make men comfortable around you so they won't look at you like a piece of meat. I've been told that by women. Instead of them, putting the men in place, they tell me to change who I am, to change my identity. Right now, I work for Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, and we're focusing on education fund reform. So we're working with a lot of elected officials, stakeholders to make education more equitable as far as resources given to the most underprivileged children in the state. And as a young black woman, I go into meetings, and oftentimes they don't even address me. I have to aggressively assert myself into the meeting. I have to make it a point to say something that's memorable. And every day it's a challenge, but you have to overcome that, because you're in this game, and you just have to know what you're worth and how valuable you are. So, I charge every woman to realize, know your worth, because every day it's going to be a challenge. Every day it's going to be a new issue about how you look. Are you smart enough? Are you pretty enough? But you just got to focus on having confidence in order to play this game and become a top leader in whatever field you are striving to be in.
I honestly don't need this. So I've been trying to figure out which example I was going to use, and I think this one is actually a really important one. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to be a featured speaker for a group of like 300 teenagers. I don't know if you know many teenagers. They're not really nice in large groups. So yeah, it's just generalization, but I'm just saying, like, generally speaking, it does happen that way. And so I went to go step in front of the classroom or the lecture hall, because this was at Loyola University. And I start out my spiel with, today we're going to talk about the world as it is versus the world as it should be. And immediately a group of boys up at the top start, speaking amongst themselves. And I'm like, hey, you're being sexist right now, and here's why. So I pointed that out to them. And I say this all to say is that we internalize this sexism at a very young age. Mm-hmm. And this group, 300 kids, half of them weren't going to give me the time of day, and I took the time out of my day to share with them my experiences as a person of color, as a woman of color in the city and in the work that I do, right? So when I checked it, silence. I got the most questions that day out of that group. I got the most engagement that day out of that group, and the teachers made a point to say, oh my gosh, we need to start telling them this.